it's Dr. Cassie Smith, and welcome to Back to the Basics, a simple approach to health in the modern world. I appreciate you taking the time to join me today and hopefully learn ways that could help you improve your health. The modern world has left little time to focus on health and wellness. I hope to give you some quick and simple ways to be well and live your best life. In 2023, the global supplement market was valued at approximately $360 billion, and it's projected to reach about $385 billion in 2024. The market's expected to continue growing at a steady rate, potentially doubling to $758 billion by 2034. This growth is driven by increased health awareness, demand for immune-boosting supplements, and an aging population. I am so ecstatic about our guests today. I have brought on somebody to answer all of our questions about supplements. So I was doing some research prior to this podcast and my mind was blown. A lot of you reach out to me with questions about supplements. So of course I found you guys the best person to answer all of these questions. So his name is Shawn Wells and he has a background in business administration and marketing. He has his master's degree in nutritional biochemistry from the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. His professional journey saw him as the chief science officer at BioTrust Nutrition, overseeing brand marketing, R&D, regulatory chain, quality control. And this was pretty impressive as this company was a $125 million per year company. He then went into further working with other supplement companies. Most notably, he worked on the acquisition of Dymatize by Post Holdings, and he's been a serial entrepreneur. He owns multiple partnerships and stakes in a lot of different supplement companies, but he's got an expertise in biohacking, anti-aging, and health optimization, which is why I found him for you guys. He is voiced as the world's greatest formulator in the supplement industry. He's got over 2 decades of experience and has formulated more than 1,100 products, which he distributes worldwide. He holds over 40 patents, including multiple things which we're going to ask him about. He's got one right now that I really want to ask him about, and you guys have asked about it as well. He is also a fellow in the International Society of Sports Nutrition and has over 10 years of experience as a chief clinical dietitian in both acute hospital and skilled nursing settings. He's been featured in 5 global recognized documentaries as well. In addition to that, he's on tons of TV and radio every week. He has a radio show, One Life Radio, that's aired weekly on iHeartMedia. This is why I really like Shawn. So you guys know that I have a personal interest in health and my own personal story. So he's overcome a personal health challenge himself, including Epstein-Barr virus, chronic fatigue syndrome, fibromyalgia, depression, insomnia, obesity, and a pituitary tumor. So he's like an endocrinologist's dream. And he stands as a beacon of hope and informing other people and countless individuals on how he did this. He's got a passion for health and wellness. And he's very, this is obvious in the work that he does. He contributes to masterminds, conferences, magazines, TVs. And so he also has a company called Zone Halo where he helps create and formulate supplements. So please help me welcome Shawn to Back to the Basics.
Thank you. Thank you.
Quite the introduction. So before we start, these are some facts that I pulled, and I think I sent you this, and I was telling some people yesterday on social media. It's estimated that a significant percentage of dietary supplements on the market are of poor quality. The FDA says up to 50% may have issues, like inaccurate labeling, they're contaminated, or they have unverified claims. The AMA or JAMA, also both of them published studies that more than 20% of supplements sold in the US were contaminated with unapproved or banned substances. And then they said that a lot of the factors that contribute to poor supplement poor supplement quality includes lack of regulation, right? So you can talk a little bit about this. Contaminant. So a lot of these supplements have heavy metals like lead and mercury that you can actually test, which is crazy, right? Because nobody would eat lead or mercury, but we're putting these in supplements. And then a lot of them are mislabeled. And so blows my mind because this is a $385 billion market and people are essentially half of them are putting crap in their body. Is that basically your understanding?
Yes, I mean, to some degree, unfortunately, that is the case. Now Foods, who is probably one of the most important legacy brands as far as quality goes, and was probably the one that was most hurt by Amazon coming onto the market. A lot of these mom and pop supplement stores would be half their store would be Now Foods, right? It's a very, very big supplement brand. And so they've done a good job at testing out a lot of different supplements. And if you've looked over the past year and a half, they have tested a number of supplements on Amazon as well as Walmart, especially ones that were just pure ingredients. For example, they looked at berberine, they looked at astaxanthin, they looked at ginseng. They looked at about 15 different ingredients. And what they found on average was about 50 plus percent were not meeting the label claim, sometimes as high as 70%. And about, to your point that you were just making, about 20 to 30% or so had no active at all. And this is unfortunately very common on Amazon, where it's just a race to the bottom in terms of price, where you can manipulate reviews. And so that's how some of these companies end up winning in terms of the Amazon algorithm, is just having a great price, quickly delivering, and they're intentionally making supplements that have no active at all. Now Foods really pushed this back on Amazon, and now Amazon is demanding a little bit more testing, as is Walmart these days. So fortunately, that did help the industry, I would say, but it's not at the place it needs to be.
So you're saying 20 to 30% of supplements you purchase on Amazon may have zero active ingredients. I want to make sure everyone hears that, because I tell my patients this too. When you talk about supplements and you talk about wellness, a lot of times they'll say, well, I understand this is the supplement you recommend, Dr. Smith, but I can buy it on Amazon for half the price. And my response to them is, well, do you know what you're getting on Amazon? And you're telling me now that 20 to 30% of those have nothing in them at all. Or worse, sometimes they have bad things in them, right?
So I was just going to get to that part. So that does happen too. Sometimes, potentially, it is because of the raw material supplier getting like very cheap raw materials, and the company that is a very cheap company, these fly-by-night companies that are on Amazon, for example, that you have never heard of. Those are ones that are not going to do third-party testing. They're going to take the word of the raw material supplier. The raw material supplier is doing what's called dry labbing. I'm doing air quotes for dry labbing, because dry labbing means not doing any laboratory testing at all. It just means typing your testing results. And then it gets passed to a contract manufacturer that's more of a fly-by-night contract manufacturer that bottles this product and puts it out. And they didn't do their testing. They're taking the word of the raw material supplier, because all of that extra testing costs money and slows things down. Now, if you're doing top tier raw material suppliers, if you're doing top tier contract manufacturers, if you're with a top tier supplement brand, none of those things are going to happen. But unfortunately, yes, a lot of the stuff in particular that is on Amazon, especially from these brands you've never heard of, could have no active, test well below the active, or contain contaminants that you don't want in there. And that is a huge frustration for many of the people that are buying these products, thinking they're going to work, thinking that it's going to impact their health. And maybe you're in a place where you really need impact. Maybe you're on the edge of myocardial infarction or stroke or what have you, CVA. And you're taking these supplements to help you. Maybe they're doing nothing. Maybe they're actually hurting you. So this is where it definitely pays to go with these top tier brands that are doing all the additional testing. And it's not like, I've worked at some of these companies, as you mentioned before, the BioTrust, Dymatize. We had teams of people doing quality control. 5, 10 people doing quality control, like responsible for that testing, tracking that testing, seeing where this lot is at, making sure that everything's okay with that lot. So that is, it's expensive. It's very expensive to do everything right. And these companies that just pop up on Amazon, they're not doing everything right.
Yeah. So, and that's, I think, what really fires me up about this too is like, I am so happy that the world in general, we have this like push for wellness, right? So, like the statistic that I read to you said that by 2034, the supplement industry is probably going to double and be close to $1 trillion a year because people are at increased awareness about, hey, I need to be taking care of my health. I want to live longer. But what's really frustrating is there are people taking huge advantage of those people and giving them garbage or so maybe taking advantage of them and just taking their money is one thing, but taking advantage and giving them something that could hurt them is where I get really fired up, like the lead, the mercury, stuff like that. Like I have people who come to me, we try to detox from that sort of stuff, and then they're taking something every day that they think is helping them and it's really hurting them. And so I've been on this bandwagon for years. I've been on the proponent of like, if you bring me your Walmart, Amazon supplement, that's whatever it is, and it says it's got whatever, well, that's great. But nobody is really monitoring that, right? So can you talk to that? Like, I guess the question is like, who regulates supplements? The answer is no one, right?
You can make that argument. I mean, technically, it is the FDA. Supplements are technically regulated. The unfortunate thing that's happening is that there's just not nearly enough personnel to possibly follow the regulations. So it's really only when something rises to extreme red flag level, when there's recalls and things like that, that you might see a company run into issues. So I would say there is regulation, but it is largely unregulated.
So if I decided tomorrow I wanted to make a supplement company pop up and start making creatine, I could probably do that if I came up with a name, how to manufacture, did it, bottled it, and sell it. Like, is there any sort of process you have to go through in order to do that that's highly regulated?
Yeah, again, highly regulated is a tough word because I say it's not. I mean, the FTC also gets involved with claims, whether you make that on a website, on radio, on in print, things like that, that they can get involved. But and you're supposed to submit to the FDA when you have complaints that come in that would include your adverse events and serious adverse events. Adverse events are when someone says that I had gas, I had heartburn, I had nausea, vomiting. Serious adverse events are when they end up going to a clinic or a hospital with those symptoms. And then those are supposed to be investigated by a third-party medical review team, and that's submitted to the FDA. And again, good companies do this. At every company I've worked at, we've done this. We've had a team do this. And but again, I've talked to many of these companies that are these Amazon type companies, and they've never even heard of that. So they're definitely not doing it. So there's a lot of companies doing the right thing, and there's a lot of companies not doing the right thing. And it kind of becomes obvious when you're looking at a company like Now or Thorne or Designs for Health or Nordic Naturals and some of these brands that have been around for 20, 30 plus years, and they've always tested out when like a Consumer Reports tests them, or some of these other groups test them, they always test out. But there are certainly these companies that are on Amazon in particular, like we said, that 2 years ago did not exist, and they're like a 1 or 2 person company, and maybe it's being fulfilled by Alibaba. You got all this like TikTok brands and all these things that are happening now, and people are buying these things up all the time. And to your point, they can have heavy metals, they can have banned substances, they can have things like SARMs in them, or anabolic substances, or even drugs. Like there's a lot of these erectile dysfunction pills that are, at the gas station that contain metabolites or analogs of Cialis or Viagra, etc. And that could be in a natural libido capsule that's on Amazon. Why is that a concern? Well, a PDE5 inhibitor could cause blood pressure issues in someone that has blood pressure problems already, that has hypertension, or again is at risk for stroke or heart attack. And we don't know, like, these things are actually in there. And maybe that's something they put in there so that they get good reviews, but it's frightening. There are a lot of these companies that are doing very dubious things.
So, how is there a way to know that supplements are safe? Like, is there a way to tell if like the ingredients are really
Yeah.
what's listed?
Yeah.
Do you like what you've heard so far? If so, Modern Endocrine is now able to provide telehealth services in 8 states, including Arizona, Nevada, Oklahoma, Texas, Ohio, Illinois, Michigan, and Georgia. If you would like to become a patient, visit our website at www.modern-endocrine.com/contact. You can also email us at hello@modern-endocrine.com or call our office at 405-286-1571 to schedule an appointment. Please note, we no longer accept insurance for new patients. However, we do have customizable membership programs available. Your first visit will include a detailed intake, and lab orders will be provided to further assist us in developing your 10 stages to ultimate health plan. We do offer discounted lab rates with a nationwide lab service. And now back to the show.
I have a list of things. So, one, I look for a brand that's been around potentially. That's a good sign. Two, that they don't make crazy claims. If a company has 880% more muscle, that is, the FDA describes that as something that is meant to be manipulative, essentially. Like, a lot of times you can manipulate data, right? Like where it's the active group or the experimental group, had a 3% change, and the placebo or control group had a 1% change. And then it looks like, wow, like the difference is massive, but
Yeah.
statistically it would be massive. But if you look at these two things next to each other, it's basically both of them are doing next to nothing. But like, if you can manipulate statistics, you can do that. And so
the pharmaceutical company likes to do that too, right?
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
Sorry.
100%. So another thing to look for is full transparency. So I want to see someone that is listing the appropriate ingredients. So they're listing the actual ingredient. If it's an herb, then it's a plant part that they're listing, like the root, the stem, the leaf. They're listing genus and species of that herb. They're listing the active that it's standardized for and the percentage, and then they're listing the dose. And all of that is there. And then every ingredient is like that. And there's a reason for every ingredient. If it's a blood sugar product and it's got 34 ingredients, because every single ingredient has been mentioned in some type of blood sugar data, that is really stupid, right? That's a proprietary blend. That makes no sense. Like, just pick the one ingredient that has the one mechanism of action that makes sense, and look for complementary, or even better, synergistic ingredients, and put them together that each have different mechanisms of action. So, and when you have full transparency, you can go to examine.com, Google Scholar, PubMed, and you can go look these things up and go see for yourself what the appropriate dose, what the appropriate plant part is, what the appropriate standardization is. Because here's like another way that you can scam someone is, one, you've all seen proprietary blends, right? So that's going to be 40 ingredients and it's 700 milligrams. It has to be by law put in order of descending mass. So the first ingredient could be 699 milligrams. And the other 39 ingredients could be 1 milligram. This should be illegal, but by law, it's okay. And then if you ask the brand, they're going to say, it's our intellectual property, we're protecting it. The only time I will accept that is if they've done studies on it. On their finished product, they've done studies on it. Otherwise, they're just lying to you and they're just trying to save money. Because I guarantee that first ingredient is the cheapest one, and the ingredients in the middle to the end are the most expensive ones that they're fairy dusting. Okay, so then the other thing that can be quite dubious when we're looking at these is something like ginseng. Let's say it's a ginseng product. One way to save a lot of money would be that you have the whole ginseng, the whole plant. It's only the root that contains the ginsenosides. And it's only something that's standardized to ginsenosides is probably the one I would choose. But if it's not even root, if it's whole plant, now they're saving lots of money. So this is where you get burned on this stuff. And if you're buying something from Jarrow, from Life Extension, from Thorne, from Designs for Health and all these companies, they do not do that. They do not do any of these things that I'm talking about. But there are a ton of brands that are in Walmart and on Amazon.com that are doing this, without a doubt.
So you should be very particular about proprietary blends, because I see a ton of that. Like my patients bring me supplements all the time. A lady brought me one today. I'm taking this proprietary blend of, whatever it is for her hormones. Yeah. And I'm like, yeah. So, okay. So you want to make sure that the brand has been around a long time. You want to make sure they don't make crazy claims like 888% more muscle mass. You want to make sure there's full transparency in what's actually there, like the type of the plant, where it's coming from, the percentage, the dose, so you can go look it up. You want to make sure if there is a proprietary blend, they have actually done a study on that. One that I can think of, and you may know about this, Arteriasil. Have you heard of Arteriasil? I think that they're doing studies on that currently. That's like a proprietary blend. I can't think of any other.
If it's an ingredient, like if it's a blended ingredient, and they're doing studies on it, like where there's two herbs and they're doing stuff, then I can see that. Like, again, if you're doing studies on your finished product, or it's going to be a branded ingredient where it's two herbs together and you're doing studies on it, great. That's fine. But in the case of 99% of these things, when they have proprietary blends, it's just manipulative.
And then you just want to make sure that the part of the plant that has the efficacy is what is actually being used, not the whole plant. Yeah. That all makes sense.
You want to make sure that there's a proper sell-by date on there, that it's stamped, that you know the lot. And you can always go back to the company and say, I have this lot number with this manufacturer sell-by date on it. Tell me how this product tested out for the raw materials as well as the finished good. And by law, they're supposed to tell you, they're supposed to have those results. It's really worrisome when a company, if you were to ask that, says, I have no idea. I don't know who would have that. And that's what all these Amazon companies would say. If you were to call, one of these clinician brands, like they would have that on the ready. They would have it all like logged in their computer by date, by lot. They could pull everything up.
Yeah. And so for our listeners, if you get stuff from Modern Endocrine, we can get you all that information, every single one of it. Just FYI. Your Amazon or Walmart, I don't know. So, okay. So then companies do add fillers to ingredients in supplements to make them less effective because it's probably more cost beneficial for them. Is that what you're saying?
Depends
If they
what
do
like
that?
what you mean by fillers. Like usually fillers means like the excipients. Like so those would be things like mag stearate and calcium silicate and whatever. Usually those are in there as flow agents or to be like anti-hygroscopic to keep moisture out or to actually fill the capsule literally because you don't have enough material in the capsule. But if you just mean to add an ingredient that doesn't have efficacy, yeah, they do that all the time for sure.
Yeah. And so is there a way to look on the label to know, like, is there certain things that if you read a supplement label, you'd be like, that's probably a filler? Like, are there certain, because like when I read food labels, there are certain things I'm like, canola oil, oil, stuff like that. I'm like, nope, nope, unless it's olive oil. So there are certain things that like would be concerned about in a supplement.
I mean, there's people that are concerned about if you are getting into like excipients and things like that. There are people that have concerns about mag stearate, about things like titanium dioxide, which is like a whitening agent. Um, and certainly like even maybe in your protein powders and things like that, lecithin that is soy based and is GMO, which almost 99% of soy is going to be GMO, which means it has glyphosate and all of those things. All of that could be a concern potentially. Yeah.
Is there a way to look at supplements and know that they're third party certified? Like, do they have to have something on them that says that, like they've been like third party tested? No.
No, there isn't. But again, you're going to have like the bigger a company is, like if a company's doing more than like I would say $100 million in revenue, that they're at a point where they can't, like one bad situation could take down the whole company. But now you have companies that are doing 50 plus million on Amazon that literally have one person. 10 years ago, this would have been absolutely impossible. And now it's possible. So you're seeing like these kind of what would have been anomalies years ago. In some ways, we've gotten worse, and in some ways, we've gotten better. There's more awareness now than ever on how to buy a quality supplement, but I think Amazon really did set us back many years.
Are there any brands in particular you want to say or you don't want to say as far as you're clear of on Amazon? And I'm fine with either way. You don't have to.
I mean, I think like when you're on Amazon, here's actually another problem that comes up. And I forgot to mention this one. So I mentioned all these good brands that you should trust. One thing I didn't mention is on Amazon, there are third-party sellers that are counterfeiting those products because now Thorne, Nordic Naturals, Life Extension sell a lot. So if you get like Joe's Crab Shack selling Thorne, do not trust it. There's a very good chance on Amazon that it is counterfeit. I've heard up to 50% of some of these big brands that were on Amazon are actually counterfeit. So this is just another wrinkle in the whole equation. So if you're going to buy on Amazon, you'd want to buy like first party or like, I don't know, GNC or Vitamin Shop or, someone like that, like was selling the brand. Maybe you could trust it. But a lot of these other companies that are the Amazon seller could be counterfeiting it. And so, and if you look in some of the reviews, there's even people that show this, like they're like, hey, how come like I got this product this time and I got it last time and they're two completely different color capsules. This one's yellow and this one's white. And then the, brand gets on there and says, well, because we didn't make that one.
Yeah. So and I love Amazon. I'm not dogging Amazon. They sell convenience and I love convenience, but there are certain things you can't, I've like you cannot cheat your health. You can't be cheap with your health. You shouldn't be cheap with your supplements. You shouldn't be cheap with your food, and you shouldn't be cheap with any, protein, like anything that's going to be ingested into your body or put on your body and has to do with your health. You've got to be careful. So I think you would like to know this. I've never bought a supplement on Amazon. I never planned to. But I've been saying this for a really long time. So how about, so I have some questions from some listeners. So some of the safest, most reliable brands, I had a lot of people ask that. You said Thorne, you said Designs for Health, Orthomolecular, maybe,
Yep.
I think you said, like,
Yep.
what are there any other ones like that you want to throw out there?
Even like on the kind of cheaper end of the scale, like Now, Jarrow, Swanson, like they test out. They may not be high end, but they're quality companies as far as what you're getting on the label is actually in the product. They're not like great formulations. They tend to be like single ingredient and maybe underdosed or whatever, but at least like it is what it is and the quality control is there. But yeah, when you get to the higher end, like you're talking, pure encapsulations is another one I'm a big fan of. But you know what? I got duped on Amazon the other day. I went to buy pure encapsulations and it was like pure capsules or like some, like it was like, and it looked like the same logo. It looked like and I got duped. And then I got it and like literally the capsules had like little black specks in the yellow powder and like I returned it. And I realized that I bought some knockoff brand. So, there you go.
Okay. So the master supplement man
Yep.
even got duped on Amazon. Okay. So I had a lot of listeners that asked too about how do you pick a good omega-3? I'm interested in your response because I think omegas are great, but I'm not a just omega-3 type of person. I'm an omega, you respond, but how do you pick a good omega-3?
Yeah. So there's a lot of really bad fish oil on the market that is rancid, that is molecularly distilled from its rancidity, and may not be bioavailable, may not be its ideal form, may have a fair amount of heavy metals depending on where it's sourced. So again, I would go with these high-end clinical type brands, especially when it comes to fish oil, because this stuff is really bad for you if it's not a good one. So what you're going to look for is the IFOS, IFOS. That is a regulatory body that does do additional layers of third-party testing, similar to if you had like NSF or Informed Choice when you're an athlete. That gets really expensive, by the way. Like when you get the NSF or Informed Choice testing, you have to test all the raw materials, the finished good. You have to hold back the lot. They do heavy metal testing, banned substance testing. It takes like an additional 12 weeks of like holding back the lot. That's why products that have those certifications are much more expensive. But if you're a tested athlete, it's important, right? So the same thing with the fish oil, IFOS gets really expensive, but it can be worth it. And to go from there, you do want it molecularly distilled, ideally, but you want to make sure that it's coming from like Nordic waters. And that's why companies like Carlson's, Barlean's, Nordic Naturals, they have a long history of doing the right thing. And if you bite the capsule and it tastes fishy, that's a bad sign. So it should taste very clean if you bite the capsule. So that's one of the first things that I do. You should not get those fish burps. It's also known as, like, the technical term is repeats, like when you get the burps and they taste fishy. That's a bad sign of your fish oil. And you want Nordic waters because those waters are much cleaner. And what happens with fish is the kind of the larger fish that are predatory on the smaller fish end up absorbing all these heavy metals because they eat a lot of other fish in their lifetime. So when you get like the tunas, if you will, and some of these fish that are feeding on a lot of other fish, they tend to collect a lot of the heavy metals, whereas like a small fish might not. So that's also a concern. And if you go to these Nordic waters, they tend to be much cleaner waters where you're not finding those kinds of things as much. Whereas like if you were to fish in the Pacific, wouldn't be so clean.
Okay, so those are all great points. And, I agree with that. Like fish oil, the capsules are really big too, a lot of times. So I tell people like the way I take fish oil, my fish oil is I bite it and I just suck the fish oil out of the capsule and I throw the capsule in the trash. The one that I take tastes kind of like lemon, so it doesn't bother me. I'm also a kind of a fan of fatty 15, and we can talk about that later. But I mean, I like some of the ratios of the omega in that. So I would agree with that though. If you take something and you're burping up something nasty, it's probably not what you want to swallow.
Yeah.
So somebody asked, does turmeric deplete iron? And I don't know that it does, but I said I would ask you. What are your...
Not that I know of. So, I mean, turmeric is the herb which you're finding now be 95% curcuminoids, largely curcumin. One ingredient I've come out with is a metabolite of that called tetrahydrocurcumin that I'm a big fan of. That's actually, I would say, more effective in terms of its antioxidant potential and as far as glucose modulation. But as far as curcumin goes, it shouldn't be impacting iron. I could see if you're getting one that's cheap that has a lot of heavy metals in it, it might.
For sure. And then the other thing that impacts a lot of iron, well, women obviously when they menstruate, but then if you have H. pylori that's untreated, I see this every day. If you have H. pylori, it eats iron, and you get this more commonly when you have, and B12. And you get this more commonly when you have Hashimoto's or autoimmune conditions. So I take care of a lot of women and men with Hashimoto's. So they're more likely to get pernicious anemia and H. pylori, and that will kill your iron and your B12. So another question I got a lot from people is my PCOS women out there. So I have a lot of PCOS women. And, it used to be that with PCOS, you had to have a high testosterone. You don't anymore. There's a lot of people running around with adrenal fatigue. So they have low testosterone. But I had a lot of people reach out to me and say, what is the best supplement I can take for PCOS? And I don't know that it's one. I think there's a couple things they should take. But what is your takeaway on that?
Dihydroberberine, the ingredient that I patented. It's really controlling PCOS. There's a lot of, it's kind of multifactorial, but as far as what we're seeing, the biggest needle mover is related to blood sugar and metabolic health, metabolic dysfunction, if you will. Like a lot of people that go on a ketogenic diet, a carnivore diet, something that's low glycemic as well as potentially high fat tend to see much better outcomes. But along those lines, people that take exogenous ketones or like C8-MCTs or glucose disposal agents all see benefit and see their hormones regulate from there quite substantially. Like when 87% of the population is metabolically dysfunctional, that is a big reason for a lot of hormonal dysfunction, a lot of mitochondrial dysfunction, a lot of pro-aging, pro-disease scenarios.
So I would actually say now they're estimating 93% of the U.S. population is metabolically
They're getting worse.
sick. So, no. and I would say that from what I see, that is accurate. If not, and it's true. PCOS is a disease of inflammation and insulin dysregulation. Yeah. So the berberine that you have patented that will work with lowering insulin. Does it do anything with the hormones as far as helping with estrogen metabolism, testosterone, anything like that? Are there any things you recommend for that?
Yeah, not those directly, but when you, to the point you were just making, it does regulate inflammation, dyslipidemia, hypercholesterolemia, etc. So it is affecting those, and a lot of times the hormones will fall into place. As far as estrogen metabolism, that's when you can look at I3C and DIM and, some of those kinds of things. And potentially on the testosterone side, you can look at things like Fedosia agrestris or Tongkat Ali. You can look at zinc, boron. You can look at DHEA potentially. I mean, that has a number of pathways it could go down, but of course, you can always look at TRT as well. So,
yes, you can, and I'm okay with that as well. Okay, so perfect. I want to ask you. Well, I'm going to go here first. So I'm a huge proponent of gut health. I think you are as well. I think that the more, and I've been at this 8 years now, and I was just telling my husband last night, the more I do this, the more everything just ties back to the gut. Your brain, your depression, your anxiety, your thyroid, your hormones, it doesn't matter. Like what, and I used to get really frustrated because I do a really good job of checking a lot of labs and fixing all these hormones, and I would fix all these people's hormones, and then on paper they would finally look great, and they're like, but I don't feel anything. And I'm like, what do you mean you don't feel anything? Like everything is better. And I think a lot of it is our guts are trash. And so I also am very passionate about mental illness because there are a lot of people walking around out there with just a lot of bad thoughts, and they don't understand. They get really frustrated that they've been sick for so long. They're tired of hurting. And so can you give us like a 5-minute synopsis on the importance of gut health and maybe some supplements that you recommend? I kind of have a triad that I give people if they don't want to clean out their gut, but can you give me a little, because it's very underlooked, and unfortunately, like, mental health, I mean, you can fix a lot of it with gut and with some supplements. We don't have to give people all these terrible medicines that make you feel like zombies. And I think that, there's some education that needs to happen with providers and people about that.
There's so much I could say here. First off, just even the metabolism of drugs and supplements, you look at the bioindividuality, the biodiversity that's going to happen, and how you break these down, what their half-life is, the enzymes, the epigenetics that you have. There's a lot at play there in terms of your GI tract and your liver that are going to play a big role in just how you metabolize these drugs and supplements. So what works for one might not work for you. This is why even when I've done probably more than 100 studies on supplements, and I can tell you, no matter what, we're always looking at the average, right? The statistical mean, like in the middle. But trust me, day to day, there's fluctuations, and there's also hyper responders and hypo responders that are out on the tails. And that's not just some freak, or they didn't get it, or they didn't do it right. Those are people that have different metabolisms, different epigenetics, and they're metabolizing these things different. Now, along with that, to the point you're making, there are about 70 to 80% of your neurotransmitters are in the gut. Mm-hmm. About 70% of your immune system's in the gut. We used to think of the gut as just digestion. Then we discovered it was where most of the immune system was. Then we discovered it's where most of the neurotransmitters are. And the whole gut-brain axis, when we're a fetus, the gut and the brain are essentially together, and they separate out like as we grow. And we call the gut our second brain now, but there's an argument that could be made that that's our first brain, and the one that's in our head is actually the second brain. And so that class of bacteria that's in the gut that would affect those neurotransmitters and ultimately your mood is called psychobiotics, and there's a lot of research there. And then we talk about pre, pro, and postbiotics. And collectively, if you were to give all of them, it's called symbiotics, SYN, like synergistic. And prebiotics are going to be things that feed the bacteria. Now, you have to be careful with this. People that tend to get very gassy when they have prebiotics, things like inulin, FOS, the chicory root, things along this line, these resistant starches and all these kinds of things. That's because their gut is dysbiotic. And if it's dysbiotic and you're feeding it, then you're going to get more dysbiosis. And you want to be in a state of what would be called probiosis, which means like a positive gut microbiome. And when we talk about probiotics, that's going to be the bacteria that are filling up your GI tract. And that would be the different strains that you've heard about, like Akkermansia and there's good ones and bad, C. difficile, right? Like that's one that I dealt with a lot clinically, and even things like VRE. These are going to be throughout the gut. And the thing that I am reluctant to do, though, is I would say that a lot of supplements that supply probiotics are going to be underdosed, are not going to be stored properly. And then you can run into like monoculturing, where you're giving too much of one over the other, even if it is effective. The body can be highly intelligent if you put it in a place to be that. And it's going to change the bacteria makeup depending on where you are, what the immunity needs are, the foods that you're eating, the people that you're around, the places you're going. And so we actually want it to be variable. What's maybe the most interesting area right now is the postbiotic. And that's where you're talking about these short chain fatty acids that the probiotics are ultimately making. The short chain fatty acids, like the smallest would be C2, which is the acetic acid or acetate. The next one would be C3, which is propionic acid. And then the one we hear a lot about is butyrate or butyric acid. And I've worked on a form that's a triglyceride form that's more bioavailable. That's called tributerone. And that is a great form. That's probably one of the best things to give. But we also look at like the quality of the gut lining. And that's where we're going to look at, things potentially like collagen is going to make an impact. Glutamine is going to make an impact. Because a lot of people they lack tight junctions. And when you don't have these tight junctions, there's an opening there, and you can actually get whole food particles into the bloodstream. And that causes all kinds of autoimmunity in terms of the reaction to like from your body when you're getting gluten or, whatever it is, like literally directly into your bloodstream. And then on top of it, you have this kind of thick zonulin on the gut lining as well. And, this is an unhealthy gut. So we want to do as much as we can to heal the gut. And if you've seen like fecal microbiota transplants, which I've seen clinically, with cases like VRE and C. diff, we see people like literally like within hours radically change. You could put them on all kinds of antibiotics and you might actually make it worse because there's resistance. But we see radical change. And if you look at the mouse models where you have the obese mouse and the skinny mouse, and where they switch the FMT, where they put the feces in the other one, they transplant it. The skinny mouse gets fat, the fat mouse gets thin. I mean, it's pretty crazy what's going on there. And we do see a lot of our metabolism and our metabolic health, obviously, in the gut too. And so, to your point, it probably is the most important thing for our mood, for our health, for our immunity, for our metabolism. And it's very underappreciated.
Yes, I agree. I tell people all the time, like, I eat to live. I don't live to eat. And I believe that because I mean, you're asking your body to do so many things. And like you said, there's all these different roles. And I just really got into gut stuff like in the last year. And it just kind of found me. It's been pretty interesting. I've been on this journey. I think I kind of told you about trying to figure out like what is my true niche and what do I want to do. And sometimes I think it might be gut health is calling me more than I'm calling it. But it's very fascinating. And I do have a lot of patients that, we've worked with and have gotten a lot better. And when your gut's good, then the rest of you can heal too. And so it's a fascinating line of work. I also have found a lot of people that have severe anxiety and depression that when you fix their gut, they can actually absorb, tryptophan and they can absorb things they need to make neurotransmitters. And then, oh my gosh, they're making dopamine, they're making serotonin. You give them some a methylated B vitamin, maybe some SAMe, and you're fixing their MTHFR and you're fixing their COMT mutations. And that's actually getting to their blood-brain barrier. And oh my gosh, they feel better. They're not depressed. It's amazing what happens with just changing a little bit of the gut. And so I think sometimes my patients are sick of me saying it. And sometimes I think they think I'm a little nutty. So I'm glad that you agree with me. And that
actually
was
one thing I forgot to mention. So like I was actually drinking this. I work with these guys. This isn't a plug, but that has apple cider vinegar in it. And apple cider vinegar is acetic acid. Really, all the vinegars are. There may be a little bit more benefit to apple cider vinegar when you have the mother, which is acetobacteria. That's that cloudy stuff at the bottom of the bottle, right? But vinegar, whether you're talking about rice wine vinegar, red wine vinegar, apple cider vinegar, distilled vinegar, it's all going to have acetic acid in it. And that is that shortest chain fatty acid. That's that 2-carbon fatty acid. And what do we see? We do see gut health improve. We see blood sugar. Like it can be like if you take like a full teaspoon, like with a meal, we see a pretty dramatic impact on blood sugar, on hypertension, et cetera, especially with continued use. So that just goes to show again what I'm talking about with these short chain fatty acids, whether it's butyrate or acetic acid, et cetera. They can really affect gut health. I believe the postbiotics are probably the most important piece. And I think we're just starting to dig into those now. And what we're seeing is the C3 that I was mentioning, propionic acid, actually athletes have the highest levels of propionic acid. So there may be, I think there's so much to be discovered on this front. Like we don't know what we don't know yet. It's very new. The short chain fatty acids.
So for listeners who couldn't see him, who are not tuned in on YouTube, he was holding a can of Life cider. Is that correct? What it was called? Life cider. And so he's saying it is a C2 acetic acid. So like vinegar that you can drink. And then to be honest with you, I'm very familiar with acetic acid. I'm very familiar with tributane. I have a butyrate builder supplement that has a lot of that. I take it every day. I don't know anything about propionic acid. So is that something you can take? Is that something that, are you working on something? Should you and I collaborate on something with this? Is this something you can't talk about yet?
Yeah, we'll talk.
We'll talk later.
Show.
Okay. So a couple of other questions I have. And so I know people are dying. I'm dying to know this too. What supplements do you take every day? What is like a must? Let's start with this. What is a must that you think, like, give me 3 to 5 that every human could benefit from every day if you had to pick 3 to 5 supplements? And then I want to know what you take every day.
Okay. So the tributerone that we were talking about before, I believe in deeply. The methylated B vitamins, you were talking about that before. So methylfolate, which is also known as 5-methyl tetrahydrofolate. That would be methylcobalamin, P5P, things along those lines. Those are going to be incredible. Creatine. Everyone thinks this is for muscle strength and power. That's true. It's great. it's great for that. That's where we kind of discovered it. It is a powerful buffer methylator. But yes, as you were pointing to your head, we're not only seeing that it's neuroprotective and improving like traumatic brain injury outcomes, and ATP is what it's generating, and your heart and your brain demand the most ATP in your body. So that's where we're seeing it have dramatic impact as well. But we've also seen a newer study where they gave a larger dose of creatine and people were underslept and they had better wakefulness after taking the creatine. So there's a lot of, and I can tell you it affects bone health, reproductive health, like with the testes and the ovaries. It's really powerful. I believe that everyone should be taking creatine. And yes, it does spare muscle and protect muscle. And that is one of the most important indicators of longevity when we live in a world of sarcopenic obesity. What else am I thinking? Dihydroberberine, I mentioned before. So yes, metabolic dysfunction, absolutely should take it. It increases GLP-1, it increases AMP-K. It is really potent at lowering blood glucose, improving insulin sensitivity, but we also see that whole pathway with AMP-K, which is going to affect the sirtuin genes and telomere length and all those kinds of things. Similar to how we saw metformin be so popular with the anti-aging people for decades. And I think dihydroberberine is one of those ingredients that's just going to help, because when we see even healthy people lower blood glucose or insulin further, even beyond what's within normal limits, we see that growth hormone levels, we see that resilience improves further. There's really no like unhealthy kind of low end, to that. Obviously, if you were to have like hypoglycemia, that's one thing, but I'm talking about like where you're kind of normoglycemic, but lower where that normal glycemic would be. And it's same with CRP, like if we can get that low as well, then we're going to see someone be healthier. And so we do see that when you're taking things like metformin, or in this case, dihydroberberine. Dihydroberberine is about 5 to 10 times more bioavailable than regular berberine. You don't get the GI distress or have the bio individuality. And so the doses are a lot lower. It lasts longer in plasma, so you only have to take it twice a day versus 3 for berberine. So that's the upside of it. Another ingredient that I've brought out that I would say is really important to the market is ergothioneine. Ergothioneine could potentially be the next new vitamin. It's been really exciting, all the research that's been coming out. It is a mitochondrial antioxidant. It protects the mitochondria, not just a cellular antioxidant, but a mitochondrial antioxidant. What's really interesting is we have a unique transporter system for it in our body, as well as a unique storage system for it. The only other ingredient that I know of that has that kind of regulation and transport and storage is iron. And you brought that up before, and that's an ingredient that is critical to human life. And ergothioneine has been largely understudied, and we're just learning about it now because it's trace amounts that are really important to us, and we're seeing it impact, again, mitochondria, ATP. We're seeing impact cognitive and heart health largely. And so there's a lot more research to be done, but that one's really exciting. And when you look at, like, there's a correlation line. If you look at the countries that have the highest consumption of ergothioneine, they live the longest. And so there's more data to be collected, but that's one that I've been just really hot and heavy on. And I believe
Was there a supplement people can take with that in it already, or you're working on it?
There are a few products out there that do have ergothioneine. I think there's a lot more coming, but it's pretty new to market.
Okay.
look for doses anywhere from like 10 to 50 milligrams. But along those lines, ideally, I would throw in things like CoQ10 in the form of ubiquinol and PQQ. I'm just a big fan of protecting the mitochondria because, as we were talking about before, with metabolic dysfunction, you have mitochondrial dysfunction, you have less functioning mitochondria and a lower number. And when we do things that increase our resilience, it's going to trigger mitochondrial biogenesis, which is going to increase our number of mitochondria. And that stress on the mitochondria increases their function. So mitochondria really respond to stress. They increase in number and they increase in function. And then we also see this with brown adipose tissue, which is brown because it's mitochondrially dense. And so it's really important to stress your body in a healthy way. And that's called hormesis. That's going to increase allostatic capacity, which is your ability to handle stress. So doing things like cold plunges and hot saunas and lifting weights and fasting and maybe a ketogenic diet sometimes, and then a high carb diet another, and whatever, like all this kind of stuff like that you can do. Even like cognitive stressors are going to help on that front. So, putting your belt on the opposite way, taking a different way to work, learning a new language, learning an instrument, all of these things are going to help as well. So that actually increases neuroplasticity and BDNF and all those kinds of things too.
So in the last year, I have incorporated cold plunging every morning, hot saunas every morning, red light therapy, and learning a whole new, learning the gut, which is, mentally exhausting. So my mitochondria should be A-okay. Like, and I'm not kidding you. So I tell people, like, we do hard things, and I cold plunge every morning now. We have a cold plunge at our office. And for 5.5 minutes, I sit there, and the first minute I'm saying really bad words in my head. And then when I kind of go numb, I literally have to tell myself, like, you're making brown fat. You're making brown fat. You can do this. This is really hard. You're like, I tell myself that you're making brown fat. You're increasing cyclic AMP. You're helping your mitochondria. But yeah, it's, this is why we do.
Not only that, you're actually increasing dopamine. So like, I don't know if people know like just how important dopamine is to our lives. I think of like, I don't know if you ever saw, I'm kind of a nerd, and I think of Donnie Darko, and there's like this kind of like worm that he's like following around the room. Like dopamine is like the thing that like moves us. Like it's the reason we're doing almost everything we're doing. We're chasing dopamine. But there's healthier ways to increase your dopamine. So cocaine would have like a massive spike and a massive crash. And it's going to take a toll on your receptors, on your brain chemistry. And you're going to feel like the highest high and the lowest lows. But when you do a cold plunge, you have a 3-hour lift of dopamine. When you have intimate sex with your partner, hopefully that you love deeply, you have increased dopamine for hours. These are the kinds of things that like are the healthiest forms of dopamine, where you feel good and fulfilled for hours. And then you're not chasing other things, all these things that we get addicted to. You don't need the social media as much. You don't need that processed food as much. You don't need the alcohol as much. You don't need the smoking or the, whatever it is, the gambling, the porn, all these other things that we could be chasing for dopamine fixes.
I agree. Some people think I'm crazy, but it's true. You hate it, but you do it, and then you feel so much better. And it's better for you too. And it does help with, fat metabolism, lots of things. So, okay. So we've got tributerate, we've got methylfolate, creatine, berberine, you said dihydroberberine, and then ergothioneine. So these are your 5. So we'll have to put together like a Shawn's 5-pack at Modern Endocrine. Are there other things that you take every day? Like you can run down the list.
So some other ingredients that I've worked on are actually my favorite, because like literally it's why I work on them. beta is an exercise mimetic, literally mimics the signal from exercise, beta amino isobutyric acid. When you're exercising intensely, like for example with HIIT, high intensity interval training, your beta levels go up endogenously. I made a supplement form of this and it literally mimics exercise. So you get BDNF, you get VO2 max improved bone mineral density, decreased fat mass, increased muscle mass, etc., as a result of taking beta. Dileucine is a dipeptide form of leucine that I came up with, that the thought there was leucine is the thing that triggers mTOR, muscle protein synthesis, but there's a dipeptide transporter, di and tripeptide transporter in the gut called PEPT1 that transports the di and tripeptides, 2 or 3 amino acids, much faster than even a single amino acid, which seems counterintuitive. For years, we didn't know why. Even when I knew about this, I didn't know why. But I thought it could be faster and maybe we'd see better results. It's 189% faster. We see 60 to 80% more muscle protein synthesis gram for gram. That's a game changer when it comes to muscle, maintaining muscle mass or gaining mass, whether it's for, athletic purposes or aging or physical therapy and all these different clinical applications. So that's pretty exciting. Why we know the PEPT1 transporter is probably there now is bioregulatory peptide signaling. I didn't know that when I was working on this about 10 years ago. I just thought for some reason it's there and this is cool. Now I understand that a lot of these 2 or 3 amino acid chains are there for a specific reason. Like glutathione is a 3 amino acid, tripeptide. So there's a lot of those in the body that have very important purposes. So,
and I think glutathione is super important too. You were talking about mitochondria, and I think mitochondria are important to protect but glutathione is a huge detoxifier. And so that's the other thing I see with people is like, when you are trying to get healthier, you have to detoxify, and you detoxify through your liver, which requires methylated B vitamins and glutathione, right? But then you have to also poop every day. So that's a problem because a lot of people don't do that. And you have to sweat. And so I do think that glutathione is something, our poor livers are under just a giant amount of stress with the food that we eat, the toxins we consume, the mercury and lead in the supplements we buy from Amazon, the air that we breathe, like all of these things. And so I do think that glutathione is I take glutathione religiously. So that's another
either
one.
that or N-acetylcysteine would be good to raise glutathione levels.
And vitamin D, I'm assuming you take some sort of.
I was just gonna say 2 really obvious ones, but that are ridiculously critical. Like what's crazy is every time I do a post on either one of these, they're my viral posts, and they're the 2 most simple things is magnesium and vitamin D3. But they're so important. On average, about 70% of the population is deficient in either one of them. D3 is kind of like how I was talking about the gut, where, we just thought, when I was a kid, I grew up in the 70s and 80s, I learned about D, milk, bone. That's all I thought it was for. And then even when I was, getting my master's in nutrition and becoming an RD and all that, bone. Now we know D3 is a hormone and has a million purposes for metabolic health, for testosterone, for immunity, all kinds of things. Vitamin D3 is part of this endocrine cascade. And then magnesium, you have, I think it's around 250 different chemical reactions in the body that are dependent on this coenzyme, taking place with it that needs magnesium. And again, this is not just bone. It's going to be blood pressure. It's going to be testosterone, immunity, all kinds of brain health, obviously bowel function. So, magnesium and D3 are massive, and just the ability to relax is going to be much easier with magnesium. I think a lot of people that have trouble relaxing or getting a good HRV, getting quality sleep, it's largely because of magnesium deficiency.
Okay. So all of this has been super informative. I could pick your brain forever. On an ending note, and then I have 3 questions to ask you about. One of the things I know you and I talked about a lot, I just get blown up with what protein do I use? And we were talking also about how so many people have dairy issues or whey issues, right? It bothers their stomach. And so you were giving me a lot of good tips on how to find good vegan proteins. And there may be something coming, listeners, where I may have a really good option for you for a vegan type, not vegan type, just not a whey based protein. But as far as that goes, I guess Shawn and I will talk about this more and we'll get back to you. But there are other ways to get protein. You can make it from egg whites. You can make it from plant-based stuff, but you can also make it from, you were telling me, pumpkin seeds, different things like that. And so there are some actual really good proteins out there that aren't necessarily vegan, but don't have whey in them. And so that is something you can look for as well. And like you said, you want something sometimes that doesn't have lectin in it because that has soy and GMO. And so we are discussing this, listeners. I know I'm not ignoring all of your comments. I just don't have an answer for you yet, but we may have one soon. So I'm looking forward to more collaboration in that because I think, protein is so important. I preach this all the time. For myself, it's hard as well. It's 6:45 here. I've only had 85 grams of protein. So when we're done, I have to go hammer another almost 50 grams of protein because I don't go to bed without 135 grams of protein. It's never negotiable for me. So I do like, the option of shakes and things like that. So stay tuned. We may have him back on just to talk about protein powders because I know you guys we could do one just on protein powders like creatine, drinkable things for sure.
There's a lot of scams in protein that I could get into for sure.
Yeah, maybe we'll just do a whole episode on that. If you guys want a whole episode just on protein, creatine scams, then you leave me a review, DM me on social, something like that, and we'll get him back on and we'll set it up. So I have 3 questions I end every podcast with. I'm going to adjust yours a little bit, but one of them is, what is one food that's most beneficial and why? You have to pick one food.
One food that's most beneficial.
You don't have to overthink it. I get all sorts of answers, but I'm just curious from your nutraceutical brain.
I'm going to say, I really feel collagen is something that is underappreciated because we tend to eat the muscle, right? We used to eat the whole animal. We used to eat the skin. We used to eat the hooves. We used to eat the tendon, the ligament, the connective tissue. We don't eat that anymore. We don't eat the organs anymore. We only eat the muscle. So we're missing all of the collagen, and 1/3 of the protein in our body is collagen. All that colla is Latin for glue, like the connective part of all of these things. It's keeping us together. Yes, it's important to get your high leucine, high muscle protein synthesis type of protein, but also it's important to also have collagen. I think 20 to 40 grams a day, actually. But if I was going to eat it, that would be even more ideal, is to get organs, to eat skin, to eat the connective tissue, to have Jello or whatever it is, to have more collagen in your diet.
Okay. If you had to pick one supplement that was most beneficial, just one, what is it and why?
If I was to just pick one supplement.
Get one supplement.
I think it is going to be a creatine monohydrate.
Creatine. Okay.
Yeah.
And then what is one supplement, or however you want to call it, supplement or something, what is the one thing that you've made that you are the most excited about that just lit you up and is still your favorite?
Paraxanthine.
Okay.
It's a metabolite it's a metabolite of caffeine. About 60% of the population is slow metabolizers of caffeine, of which I am one, the CYP1A2 gene. It can take us days to clear caffeine after we consume it.
That's me too, by the way.
Caffeine is fairly toxic in its own regard until it converts to paraxanthine. It also converts to theophylline and theobromine, but it's actually in plants to repel insects. And when you get to paraxanthine and when you clear out caffeine, theophylline, theobromine, and just go for paraxanthine, what we find is that you see increased BDNF, again, neuroplasticity, increased nitric oxide to the brain, increased glutathione catalase, decreased beta amyloid plaque, improved cognitive performance and resilience, decreased mental errors, improved focus, increased dopamine, acetylcholine, and serotonin levels. And you don't have the bioindividuality. You don't have the habituation and adaptation effects. Like habituation would be the physiologic dependence that you see with caffeine. Adaptation would be the effect where you need more and more and more to see the same effect. You don't have any of that on paraxanthine. So it's a super clean effect. Your HRVs actually improve on it, not worsen. So I love that one.
Okay. Paraxanthine. So I'm going to try some for sure, and I'm going to report back. But Shawn Wells, thank you so much for agreeing to come on here. And I know listeners are going to love this. There were so many questions I had. I know they're going to love it. And then I'm going to put it out into the universe. Shawn and I are going to collaborate on something. We haven't figured out what it is yet, but he's going to help Modern Endocrine make something phenomenal. And when he does that, we'll definitely have him back on so he can explain what we did.
It's going to be called Shawn Labs. And
Shawn Labs.
It's a Cassie Shawn production.
Got it. Shawn Labs. We're gonna make something for Modern Endocrine, and it's gonna be. And here's what I really like about him, you guys. So you can tell he's very passionate about what he does. He's very intelligent, but also, I got introduced to him, and I was talking to him about making some stuff for Modern Endocrine, and he could have just been a typical sales guy and been like, yeah, let me take all your money and let's make something. And what he said to me was, Cassie, you need to figure out what you really want to make, what's really going to make a difference, and what you really want to put in it so that we don't mess it up and it costs you a lot of money and we're not really helping people. And that's when I knew he was a stand-up guy, because he could have just taken my money and said, all right, let's make something. And so I took that to heart, and I've really been trying to find my niche this year, and I'm almost there. I've been very frustrated, but I've been doing a lot of praying too. And when I have it, Shawn and I are going to make something phenomenal, and I can't wait. I'm so excited. I can't wait.
I'm excited.
Okay, well, thank you so much for coming on. We're going to link all your stuff in the show notes so people know where to find you. I'm sure they're going to have lots of questions. Make sure you follow him on social media. You guys all tag him in my social. He has amazing posts, and he's, obviously very good at what he does. Until next time, next week, make sure that you're tuning in as well. If any of this was beneficial to you, please share it with somebody. I know you have somebody who needs to know they need to take their creatine or knows about the crappy supplements they buy on Amazon. So please make sure you share this. Leave us a review, subscribe, and like our stuff, and we'll see you next week. The information presented, including any materials discussed, referenced, or linked within this podcast, are for general educational purposes only, not the practice of medicine. No doctor-patient relationship is formed from you listening to this podcast or utilizing any of the information provided. I am a doctor, but I am not talking to you as your doctor. The information provided is not intended to diagnose or treat health problems, or take the place of the professional medical care provided by your doctor. If you are experiencing any health problems, including problems you believe have been touched upon in any respect within this podcast, you should consult your doctor about the problems without delay. You may ask your doctor whether he or she believes the information I have provided would be helpful to you, but you should still consult your doctor immediately and follow his or her medical advice as your treating physician. I'm just here to provide you basic knowledge about the issues we discuss so you are more aware of them and can better discuss them with your doctor. That's why we call it Back to the Basics. Join me on the next episode as we continue our journey.